You have probably spent a fair amount of time. You're all teaching, yes? So you're all getting ready to teach, right? And what are you getting ready? What you're getting ready is what you're teaching, right? The content. You better know it. You better be comfortable with it. You better have mastered that syllabus, even if some other strange person created it and you have no idea why they put what they put there. And, in following along with the 5 W's and the H that you're supposed to do in the first paragraph of every journalistic article, they taught you that in second grade, I imagine. So you got the what, and you got the when and the where. The when and the where is actually important. You probably know where your class is meeting, and you probably know when it's meeting, but please make sure you check through TU Portal that they haven't, moved your class, because sometimes they do that at the last minute, and that would really not be a very good thing if you were in the wrong place at the wrong time. So you know what and when and where, and you probably know how, or if you don't know how, I would just want to underline and emphasize the fact that the Teaching and Learning Center is available for you. They've been available for me when I've had problems with students, and it's really important, and they've got all these workshops and great things to do, and a teaching and higher ed certificate that some of you will probably testify is really worth going through. Avail yourself of the how. But somehow in all that, the who gets left out. I think Stephanie's last point about the most important thing is somehow thinking about these students and making sure that they make some kind of connection to you and you make some kind of connection to them is absolutely critical. But when we think about who, what do we think about? I mean, really, who is it that we're thinking about? When I do this talk, I like to tell a story about my first experience teaching at Temple, which frighteningly was way before almost any of you in this room were born. I was a graduate student here, and they gave me Religion in America. They said, go teach religion in America. They didn't even give me a syllabus that I didn't like. So I put one together, and I had a good education, so I was all excited. I was going to teach new religious movements, and I was going to teach about the First Amendment and separation of church and state, and all of these kinds of things I was fascinated about. And I came in, and I was talking, and they didn't fall asleep, except for the couple people who read the newspapers in the back of the room. Now they have laptops, but the newspapers functioned in the same way, trust me. But mostly they seemed to be attentive and interested, and they were going along with the program. And about 3 weeks into the class, some student came up to me and she said, you know, everything you're telling us is very interesting, but I took this course to find out what's a bar mitzvah. And then it hit me that it wasn't this student's fault that they didn't know what a bar mitzvah was. The problem was with me. I created a course that I wanted to take. I created a course that was interesting to me as a faculty member, or someone who wanted to, a faculty member wannabe. And I went home that night and I thought, I'm just not doing this right. I've really got to get them the information that they need or want, or at least that's accessible to them. With the understanding that, as I learned from taking the Provost Teaching Academy, that you can't really teach anybody anything except one step away from what they already know. You can't make somebody learn here when they are thinking here. So it's really, really important to kind of get who's in your classroom. And who was in my classroom were people who'd never seen a Jew before, let alone knew what a bar mitzvah was, who'd never been, at that point, they certainly hadn't been exposed to Muslims because nobody talked about Islam prior to 2001 in this country, except for some of us in the religion department. There was really a sense that I wasn't meeting their needs because I didn't know what it was that they needed. Now, knowing who's in your classroom, knowing the demographics of the class may not teach you exactly who's in your classroom. But I want to make the argument that if you understand things about all of those protected categories that Eric went over very, very nicely for you, if you understand people who are coming from different social locations to this thing that we think is a diverse space, which is a whole other story. But certainly has semblances and elements of difference. They're not like you. And they're not like you in particular in the way that Stephanie was suggesting before. They don't necessarily have a passion about your subject. They don't really, maybe they didn't notice, maybe they don't care. Maybe this course, I stopped asking students the first day of class why they signed up for the course, because mostly what do they write? It fit my schedule. Somebody told me this wasn't terrible. Stuff like that. So I stopped asking. And your interest and their interests aren't necessarily compatible. But what do you learn if you take a look at who they are? So what I have for you, and we're not going to be able to do every single different category, but I'm going to focus on a couple and just ask you to think about what it means that students are not exactly who you think they are. My information, I am not a demographer. I don't do social science. That's why they have humanities for people like me. But they're nice people at the Measurement and Research Center, and every year they give the new students a questionnaire. And up until this year, they're still 1 year behind in terms of massaging the data and giving me the information. It doesn't change very much from year to year. So these are the characteristics of the class of 2011 that are not very different from the ones in 2010 and probably won't be terrifically different from the ones in 2012 that are entering this year. So this is what the sophomores right now look like, more or less. So what percentage of them entering students do you think are traditional age that would be 17 and 18? Percentage? 80, 85? So, all right, see there, I dazzled you. Now I could quit. But so, wow, so what does that mean? What do you know about your students by this picture? They're big. They're babies. If you go, do you know the Beloit Mindset study? It just came out this week. If you Google Beloit, Beloit is a college in Wisconsin, right? And they have this thing called the Beloit Mindset Study, and they have them all the way back through the 1990s. It will give you a capsule picture of what your students have never experienced. They've never lived in a world where, I'm not thinking of any of them. They're actually, I'm so far removed from them that I don't even know that such a world exists, that the world that I exist in doesn't exist with how they exist. But they've never been in a country where there wasn't a woman who was in a leadership position. That was one.
I think this year it's pilots and astronauts. I saw it on the news last night.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of.
Never knew a world without a female pilot or astronaut.
All of the above. There are lots and lots of thank you. There are about 40 of these things, and it'll just give you a feel for if you think I'm old, you're old too. And because a lot of their cultural expressions and understanding and the way they work in the world really is predicated on things that are very different from yours, even if you are only 6 years older than they are. And many of you are probably fairly substantially more than 6 years older than they are. So it's important to remember. What else about 17 and 18-year-olds?
Probably their first time being away from home.
Their first time being away from home. And so how much attention are they going to pay to what? Anything but what you're teaching them is the answer. This is a whole new world that's open to them. A lot of them, as we'll see if we ever get to the slide about how many of them come from Philadelphia, a very small percentage. They're new to this area. They're new to living on their own, and their lives are going to be exciting to them. So getting them to engage with what you're teaching them, there's kind of a little bit of an extra challenge. I was talking actually to some of these students this morning, and I asked them, well, what do you know about yourselves? And one of them actually said, I learned in high school my frontal lobe isn't completely formed. And I don't know how to plan well yet. This is actually true. It's not, I mean, again, you say, oh, you're 17, well, you're X, Y, and Z. This is the moment when I say stereotypes are not true, but they contain a kernel of truth. So if you expect every 17-year-old not to have a daily planner, you're making a mistake. But if you expect every 17-year-old to have a daily planner, you're making a mistake. The majority of them will not, and they need to be taught. How do you keep up with your classes? How are you managing your time? How have you figured out, when the first assignment is on the syllabus and they don't do it, it costs you. It's better to try to help them think through these things. It's also true that 17 and 18-year-olds, because they don't necessarily do consequential thinking, and they're also not aware of nuanced arguments. A lot of them are still in a stage when they want the answer to the question, and you want to tell them, ooh, that's complicated. Oh, well, that's very interesting. If you do it this way, the answer comes out that way, but if you do it this way, the answer comes out that way. They may not be quite so ready to hear that. But part of what you want to do is really get them ready to hear that, is to get them developing their thinking apparatus. That's the whole pleasure for me of teaching in college, is to watch those changes taking place. But if you're not aware that you're teaching 17 and 18-year-olds who may be mentally in different stages and developmentally in different stages, you're not doing your job. And you're especially not doing your job for that poor 5% of us old folks who've come back to school and are scared out of our minds because we can't handle the technology and because we don't really have a sense that we're in a cohort and everybody's looking at us, even though we all wear jeans to class. I've never seen an adult student who didn't wear jeans to class. Because they want to fit in. They're desperate to fit in. Really, really desperate. And it's important that you pay a little bit of attention to their need, but not so much attention that they take over the class, which is very often a problem with students who've come back to school, is that they are more articulate and they're not quite so petrified of speaking in a room, and they will talk, sometimes a lot. So you have to figure out both how to use their life experience effectively and not let them dominate the class. So age may not, again, seem like such an interesting question, but there, I made it somewhat interesting, right? Yeah, okay. So let's see what I can do with this. What do you think? 60, 50, 52. For a while, they made me do this with clickers, and people got so obsessed with whether they were right or wrong, they didn't listen to what I was saying about the importance of this. So what difference does gender make in a classroom? What difference does gender make in a classroom? What do you think? Nothing. Women are equal. They just get harassed occasionally. Sometimes the men do too. What difference does gender make? Participation. Who said that? A woman. What'd you say? No. Say more. There is more to say about that. Yes, I do. Because I'm tired of hearing myself, frankly.
I don't know, it seems like, especially in creative art, it seems that guys want to put themselves out there. Because if they say something with regards to their music, they might be musically biased.
So in the arts setting, women may have some advantage in terms of their comfort level in terms of talking. Excellent. And red sweater, I can't read your name, please.
What I've heard often is that it's in law school classes that in classes with both genders, the women are not able to speak up and stuff like that.
And they're not as likely to get called on. I teach, occasionally I teach a race and gender class, and I had one student from engineering, and I got him to just hang out and observe the dynamics in the classroom, in his engineering classroom, and he was shocked that the 7 out of the 45 women in his class almost never got called on by the professor. It still happens. You know, we do think we're kind of beyond this, but the context means everything. And in certain contexts, often in the sciences, as you're suggesting to me, in the legal context, and then in the arts context, different kinds of things happen. Just again, pay attention if you're a TA instructor, if you're an instructor in a lab in the sciences, and you see that the boys are all the guys, they're young men, all figuring out how to do the experiment and working together, and the young women in the class look a little more flummoxed. Mix them up. Do something. Pay attention. That's my main point in terms of gender. You just got genderized in that last session, so we're going to move right along. You know what, by the way, the race and gender statistics are overall for undergraduates because they don't do them in the new student questionnaire. Whatever. But this is public information that you can get actually on our website. So what percentage of the students, undergraduate students are white? 52%. No, they're not all women. Okay, by the way, I'm using, this is all done by census categories, so forgive the white non-Hispanic. Okay, so we have 61% white students. How about African American students? What percent? 25. We have never had 25% African American students in the entire history of this university. It used to be 18. We are falling off. Temple has there have been sociological studies done that suggest that when a minority population gets over 30%, which would be true of all of the people of color combined here, that people begin to perceive that it's no longer a majority white. That is, white people begin to perceive that it's no longer a majority white. And there is this perception that we have a huge percentage of African American students. We do not. But it's higher than most universities of our kind. That is, when you look, I love reading the Chronicle of Higher Education because I get an incredible, apart from the Beloit study, I get a lot of great, fabulous facts that I immediately forget because I have no room left in my head except for my students' names next week. But when we do comparative studies of diversity, and the Chronicle does that every year, you will see that we actually are ahead of the game in terms of 14% African American in a predominantly white university is actually very high. What about, what's next, Asians? What do you think? 10%, bingo. The 0.6. I'm a humanities person. 10% Asian. The next one, believe it or not, is broken out Pacific Islander, which you can tell we're on the East Coast. So-called Hispanics, what percentage of Hispanics? It's the fact that you can't do the arithmetic on it, I'll explain when we get to the end of this. This is very good for us. We have been averaging 3%. So the fact that it's up 1.5% actually means that perhaps we're paying a little bit more attention to the fact that we are not only situated in an African American neighborhood, but we are also situated in a Latino, predominantly Puerto Rican neighborhood. And that's where we live. And so we ought to want to be bringing people in who are of Hispanic heritage. And again, this is not the international students. Okay, what's left? Good old census. Now you can identify by having more than one race. I am guessing that this is a very low ball estimate. It's just people don't necessarily want to, that biracial is not how they want to identify. That's up also. We had 0.1% American Indian or Alaska Native, and we now have 0.3%. Again, East Coast disability for us. That's why if you were trying to do the numbers, that's why it's confusing. I don't really know what unknown means. Either they don't know or we don't know, but somebody doesn't know. Eric warmed you up really well. You're a great You're a great audience. What does it mean, though? I mean, what can we glean from this data? What do we want to know? What would be helpful for us in a classroom? Why do we care? Everybody's the same. We're post-racial. Why do we care?
A lot of students will probably be spending time around people of other races, or a lot of people of other races for the first time in their lives.
Fabulous. We claim diversity. People come here for diversity. I mean, most white students will tell you, I came here because I grew up in a place where I didn't know anybody who wasn't like me, and I really wanted to broaden my racial understanding. Do we have any obligation in a classroom to do anything about that? You're saying no. Does anybody feel like they want to do something about that? Practically, is there anything that you can do? I mean, is there anything you can do? Well, if something comes up in your classroom, it's really smart to have done some reading about how to prepare for racial tension. There's racial tension even when nothing comes up in your classroom, and it's really important to notice. Just first level, again, just like you want to pay attention to how old they are and whether they're, who's answering and who's talking in class and who isn't. You really want to pay attention to where people are sitting and why they're doing that, and whether that's making some folks uncomfortable, or what the story is with your students. You also may want, if you have any flexibility, if you're in the humanities or arts or whatever, and you're assigning readings, you may want to think about whether your readings are racially sensitive. You may want to really take a look at what you're assigning and read it through the eyes of someone who might be different from you and see if they would be comfortable with it or not. Pamela, we have 4 minutes. Go.
But there's a lot of research about the impact of diversity on learning, and that there are learning outcomes associated with diversity. And you might think we're just talking about the humanities and the arts, but we're not. Like, you can look at research in engineering that if you put diverse groups of students together for engineering problem solving, that the solutions are more creative. So I just want you to think about that. No matter what your field is, if you sort of have students working together, they're learning from each other, and there are learning outcomes associated with it.
Thank you. So the message is, not only should you try to mix them up by gender, you also want to maybe try to mix them up by race, but you don't want to freak out if all the students sit together in the lunchroom, especially because you're dealing with people who are people of color in this university, don't have a lot of people of color around them, and they need each other. And we need to be respectful of their needs for each other. So you want to break them up into groups in classrooms, but you don't necessarily have to worry about the needs that people have to kind of be together as well. Yes, sir.
How do you justify, like, I understand what you're saying, but how do you justify it in the sense of not considering that discrimination, because you are choosing, you're saying you're going to go here and you're going to go here, and you have to work together simply because you're racist.
You have an answer, or you want more questions?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, why do you consider, weights when it comes to, like, for example, section groups into, like, group work? I mean, I feel like if you gave everybody a random number and they got together, there happens to be a mix, let it be. But,
So,
don't even consider it.
sometimes you want to use random numbers. Sometimes you don't want to use random numbers. Sometimes you want to put all the smart kids together so they can have no, I'm serious. If you have A students, maybe at one point you want to say, for this experience, you want to select a group that they've been suffering in those small groups teaching everybody else. Let them have a positive experience. Not the whole semester, not for every experience. See it. If you want to experiment and see if Pamela's research is actually accurate. If you do get more creative solutions if people are put into groups, don't be afraid to make group selections sometimes. Do it randomly sometimes. Don't do it randomly sometimes. If you're committed to having groups that function the whole semester, one group, that's another story. But if you're indiscriminately making groups for this, that, and the other thing, what's that Cole Porter song? Experiment, like be free, think freely. Okay, I was serious about not wanting to keep you. Stephanie said I could, but I'm not gonna. I just want to run through these slides without discussion, just so that you get a feel for it. Percentage of students reporting having disabilities, 2.6. And 2.4 say they're uncertain. So it's very important to make sure that if you see students having problems, you make sure that they do hook up with the Disability Resources Center. What percentage identify as lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender? We have no idea because we wouldn't ask. And that's part of the problem. We still live in a don't ask, don't tell world. There are still people who are not comfortable being out, either for religious reasons or racial reasons or other reasons. If that you want to make sure, like when you're staring at a black student, you won't say something stupid, probably. Maybe not, maybe you will. If you're staring at a person with disabilities, maybe you won't say, oh, you don't want to be blind to that, if there's a blind student in your class, right? But you won't know if there are LGBT students in your class unless they self-identify. So if somebody makes a homophobic remark, you might think not, gee, that was a stupid thing they said, but maybe there's someone in my classroom who is being disadvantaged by that and will be feeling uncomfortable in my classroom, and maybe I ought to challenge that statement. That goes for race and anything else as well. What percentage come from Philadelphia? Not many. A lot of them are from the burbs, okay? But just know that we don't take as many Philadelphia students as we might or we ought to. And back to question one, they're all new and they're all strange here. Living on university-owned housing, 80% are in residence. That means if they come to class in their pajamas, it's likely that they're going to come to class in their pajamas in the morning anyway, and you all really know what you want to do about that. Yes. First and this is first year students, but first and second year students live on campus, and that horrifically ugly thing that they're building, they're all going to live on campus very soon. What percentage have parents who aren't college graduates? This is actually very important. Yeah. So they don't know college stuff. They might not have ever heard the word syllabus. No, I'm really serious. They don't know what an office hour is. Temple faculty are very privileged because we can work during our office hours because nobody comes. Because the students don't know, and they don't feel like they have the right to be with you individually. You can give them permission. You can enable them to see themselves as part of this world that we live in, and you can help them enter the world of higher education, and I would argue that it's probably your obligation. Native English speakers? A lot, yes. But that means that 11, 12, however many it is, % are going to need extra assistance and help, and they're going to feel isolated, and they're going to feel different. And you want to do your best to discover if a student isn't writing well or can't perform well, whether it's because they just don't know their English isn't strong enough as opposed to their intelligence. Those are different things, the ability to speak English and being smart. Go to another country and try to speak their language, and you'll get it right away, those of us who are native English speakers. This is the last time I'm going to be able to do this because they no longer ask this question, but I find it very interesting, being a religion professor and all. The percentage that has remained fairly constant at Temple is Catholic. That's because we have a lot of Catholic schools in the area, maybe not so many anymore, but Catholic students local students tend to come and stay. They come with some preconceived notions. They come with some very, very strict backgrounds. Often they're better prepared because there's a lot of, if they've had Catholic education, I don't mean if they happen to be Catholic. If they've a lot of them have gone to Catholic school. It's just something to be aware of. We have a full range of everything else, and we have a lot of nuns, which probably many of you are as well. And finally, what percentage come from homes where the family income is under $59.99? High, high. Okay, so what that means is they're going to be working outside of the class in addition to trying to figure out being independent and having fun. And they're going to need help, and they're going also to be struggling with resources. And if they come to you and say, I can't afford that textbook, take them at their word. A lot of students here really do struggle, and it's really not so easy for them. So again, if you're thinking about asking them to buy books that cost $500, think twice. Think twice before you do that. Okay, I did that really quick and dirty. I really do like to have a session where people are talking and kind of getting together. I just want to see if there's anything I left out. Probably many, many things. Okay. Thank you for listening. I hope that, you feel free to disagree with me. If you feel like getting in touch with me, I have nothing to do but read my email this weekend while I'm nervous about starting teaching, because no matter how old you are, you're always still nervous about starting a new semester. But I wish you a lot of luck with it. I think that we have fabulous TAs, we have fabulous new instructors, and I think you'll really actually have a wonderful time. And if you don't, you will next semester, because because you've had experience, but also because honestly, the classes are all so different that you'll just see. It's always a second chance.